If you're curious to hear a little music from our guest Carla Lucero, who we spoke to in our most recent episode, check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. Today we continue our interview with E4TT Assistant Director and For Good Measure cover art designer, Brennan Stokes. Your music is marvelously lyrical. You're still an emerging composer, so your oeuvre is growing. Your works to date feature vocal music, including your wonderful song cycles that you wrote for us, The Unseen to poetry by Sarah Teasdale, and Mother Love to poems by Rita Dove. You want to talk about those, the inspiration, writing them, and they're both wonderful cycles.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for commissioning me to write them for the ensemble. Um yeah, Mother Love was a fun insight and kind of take on kind of the Greek story.
Right.
Um and finding, again, trying to just get shift into the mindset of I think even Rita's perspective of what this mother love meant. And I was very involved in, I think, in kind of the drama clubs of middle in college. I was heavily involved with the kind of the dramatic art societies, so doing one act festivals and um spring productions, being in kind of the church Christmas holiday programs and plays and things. So I definitely enjoy a bit of a theatricality, so to speak, and more dramatic texts.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just a lot of humanity and a lot of depth to be, and a lot of soul searching to be done, to feel like I really am getting as close as I can to understanding the text so that the music can be as honest as possible for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so for Mother Love, going on this quite emotional journey of um kind of surprise and anger and sadness and clarity, and kind of leveling out almost at the end, with not still with some tinge of, but you better take care of her or else. Um and then with the unseen, that was a very unexpected journey to have it turn into what is now the unseen. But what originally started out as a single song, There Will Come Soft Rains, which is the sixth song of the cycle.
Right.
And I remember having this book of of Sarah Teasdale poetry, Flame and Shadow. And the summer before I moved up to San Francisco, I'd gone through it, and I was just so enamored with this just really stunning lyric poetry. And I had dotted and dog-eared kind of the poems that really were speaking to me. And I remember coming across this one along with several others and feeling kind of the power behind the words, but also I think still for me knowing I didn't quite understand or have, I think, the context or a personal experience to really internalize or understand kind of the heavier weight of these texts. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I was rereading through poetry and rereading through this volume, and this poem kind of finally, a lot of these texts finally, I think, brought out a lot of the feelings that I personally was going through, and I'm sure many others were as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And where this first text of There Will Come Soft Rains, and just this kind of sense of hope amidst um kind of a deathly fog, and amidst these, things that are horrible will, you know eventually pass, and this idea of like nature, especially kind of resuming its life again, sans humans, um,
Yes.
was a very pressing feeling in the fall and winter of 2020. And I remember you asking if I was working on anything, and that song was something I had started to noodle around with, and kind of wetting the compositional pen again, and turning it into the full cycle was a really wonderful process of finding texts that again were dealing with sickness and feelings of isolation and anger or frustration. And it was a really almost kind of startling realization to read these words that were penned in 1920 and sitting there in 2020 going, this is very eerie. And of course, the goosebumps definitely were hitting several times.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just, and I remember I took about 2 weeks to completely write out the texts several times over, because there's one set of the poems where I'm just, her lyric poetry is, she has a very concise but beautiful way of describing things, and her word choice is immaculate. So anytime there were colors or like water is kind of a recurring idea. Various, yeah, like I said, colors or seasons are present, and I was trying to kind of find, you know, how many of these kept recurring in the kind of the set of poems. I think one set of me writing them out was trying to figure out like what is the almost the person who is going through this, who is speaking these words, like what is their emotional, physical journey through this whole process? Where's their psyche at, kind of as it shifts and changes, um and what kind of as the cycle like kind of almost starts, almost kind of with this kind of where it ends almost, but kind of the one of the first things is the vocalist kind of has this sharp intake of a breath, almost like waking from a bad dream, to at the very end of the cycle, um having kind of the final relaxed release of breath. um and it's just the kind of the beautiful transition between kind of the angst of and frustration and sadness of so much of the cycle that is eventually just released out, and there's a calm in the that kind of almost that thin line transition of life to death and what happens after, and what I think we can hope to have happen when all is said and done, for the last movement, kind of acting more as an epilogue or prayer of, you know a gift to be able to come back when things are just peaceful and calm. um
Yeah.
but it's definitely, I love kind of digging into the text itself, because I think there's so much to be even learned and reflected upon before I try and bring myself into the picture.
Mm. Indeed, both poets are really fabulous poets. I love their their texts, their writing, and you created dramatic arcs out of both cycles. The way you're describing the dramatic arc in The Unseen is very accurate to how it's experienced outside. So it is a wonderful piece. And you and I have talked about this, but the group is hoping to record it, not the very next one, which is already recorded and being edited, but the next recording after that. So fingers crossed that that'll come about.
Yeah.
Can you talk about lyricism in music in general and what makes vocal music and lyricism so important in your music?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the, almost, I think one of the real challenges of vocal music for me is that um any given text, especially if it's spoken, as in kind of the acting and drama classes I was able to take in my undergrad, there's intention, and there's any, 100 different ways you can say,
Mm-hmm.
I love you,
It's
or
true.
any one given sentence can be, you can have so many choices. how how your delivery of a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And with music, it's almost for me, the music almost you have to bake in what that intention or what that uh, motivation is, what the objective to why they're singing a phrase a certain way. The note isn't going to change. So it's almost like you're as the composer having to add that context and motivation behind the emotion that's going to be baked in. Um, because for actors, like one night they can be maybe whimsical about delivering a line, and the next night they can maybe try it a little more seriously.
Or even be pissed off. Yeah.
But yeah, but there's a wide range of how they can kind of choose to play something, but music is not quite as forgiving in terms of allowing us to just change the emotional character of a note that's being given, or the harmony that's dictated underneath.
Right. With text, you can think of it different ways as the singer, but in the end, well-written music tells you what it wants to say. And it's your job to interpret that and bring that out. But the music is telling you what it wants because that's, as you say, baked in.
And again, that I think part of the research of trying to understand what is being said, why it's being said. That way, when the music is sung, when the words are sung, that it feels as natural and genuine to the context of the words, and that there's no moment of going, wait, well, like it's like, oh, the words are saying this like on paper, but the way that it sounded musically maybe was at odds
Mhm.
um with maybe a person's understanding of the character and where they're coming from, because a singer is the person speaking this text or being this person. And if the two are at odds, it definitely kind of creates a little disharmony for the listener. The suspension of belief is broken for a moment when there's that little disconnect.
Yes. And that goes back to the notion of honesty,
Hmm.
compositional honesty that you were talking about earlier.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure. And a special thank you to our guest, Brennan Stokes, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.